The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for NCEA's webinar, Legislative Developments for School Choice, presented in partnership with the American Federation for Children. I'm Andrea Kopp with NCEA, and I'm happy to be your host today. Before we begin, please know that your microphone connections have been muted. If you have questions or comments during today's presentation, please send those through the chat box that appears in the GoToWebinar control panel. To ask a question, use your mouse to click into the blank box area, type your question using your keyboard, and then click Send. The webinar presentation will last about an hour, and there'll be opportunities for questions and answers at the end, but please post your questions at any time for the presenter to be added to the queue. Immediately following the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a brief survey about your experience today, and I thank you in advance for providing us with this valuable feedback. You will receive an email tomorrow with instructions on accessing this recording, the presentation materials, and a certificate of attendance. You can also download those files now from the handout section of your GoToWebinar control panel. Let us begin as we do all things in prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. It's now my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Jonathan Nicola, Director of State Operations for the American Federation for Children. Welcome, Jonathan. Thanks for joining us, and I think you have some colleagues maybe that'll be coming on the line later. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Appreciate being on this webinar. Thanks for the invitation to update folks on what's going on around the country. We have two others that'll be on the call with me in case questions come up that they're better suited to answer. One is Lindsay Rust, our National Director of Implementation, which means she works on ensuring parents in our states learn about choice programs and help them get enrolled. And then Scott Jensen, one of our national senior advisors who's been passing school choice program for many years and doing a great job of it. He's based in Wisconsin. So I'll go ahead and get started, and it'd be helpful too as we go through. Please send questions through to Andrea. Also let us know where you're from, your state. That might help us as we go through the call to address things that are more pertinent to you. So I think you can do that through the chat feature. So really briefly, I'm going to go through some slides about that our organization shows when we give overviews about school choice. If anyone attended the presentation that Scott and Lindsay did at your national conference, some of these will be familiar, but I think they're useful to go over just to give everyone a background on where we stand nationally with private school choice programs. Just really quickly, if you look at this map that shows you how broadly private school choice programs exist around the country, the two states in green are the two most recent additions, South Dakota and Maryland. But other than that, you can see it's widespread and quickly growing as every year we add more and more states. This gives you an overview of what types of programs, which we'll cover. We have voucher programs, scholarship tax credits, education savings accounts, and individual tax credit programs. But overall, 50 publicly funded private school choice programs that our organization recognizes as being meaningful in that it can give a low and middle income family a meaningful choice in where they send their child to school. Voucher programs, obviously the most traditional of the programs, and that is it's a simple money follow the child model. The money is able to go with the child to whatever public or private school that parent chooses for their child. And again, as you see here, just really quick, there's 23 of those programs that are the most common program and the longest lasting, starting with Milwaukee. Scholarship tax credit programs, these are a variation of a school choice program where the money is the scholarships are funded through private dollars, and those private dollars are incentivized through a income tax credit, sometimes other types of state taxes as well, but generally income tax credits from individuals or corporations where they give to a scholarship granting organization. And the state gives anywhere, I mean, it ranges from 50 to 100% credits. So if you give $1, you get $1 credit on your taxes. And we prefer that percentage being, of course, as high as possible. And just showing that again, there are 20 of those programs. One major difference, the voucher program, you see many more special needs, specific eligibility voucher programs versus scholarship tax credits, which tend to have broader eligibility. Just a matter of how, you know, the politics is played out. It isn't to say one's better than the other for special needs children necessarily. Parental tax credits, that's the where you get a tax credit on your personal income taxes for education expenses. And these, there are more, I'll go to the next slide to show you, it's on the far column on the right, we note only 2 of these programs because we believe most of these tax credits around the country are not bad, of course, but they tend to give very small credits on your taxes, and they also are really useful for people that have the income to pay the education expenses up front and then get a tax credit later. And part of our definition of a meaningful choice program is something that a family of low or middle income means can use. So we feel generally these programs aren't getting the job done for people on the lower end of the income spectrum. But there are more than just 2, but those are the 2 that our organization counts. Lastly, education savings accounts, which are the newest form of school choice, something that I know is very exciting to a lot of people that work in education, not only because of its ability to give people even more flexibility in how they exercise their school choice, but they feel like it's a way to really unlock the future of education because there's no real box around what that has to mean. It's not just a brick and mortar school. It can mean all kinds of ways to get services. Particularly early on, special needs families have been taking great advantage of it because of the different types of services a special needs child needs. But we see it as a really great vehicle for all types of students. And in this type of program, it is money follow a child like a voucher, but the money, instead of going only to a school, let me rephrase that, instead of the parents only being able to direct that money to a school, it is allowed to go into an account managed by the state where the parent can then disperse the money for, like I said, a variety of different things, including tuition, but not limited to. All right, really, again, going through this quickly, just showing you the enrollment growth for private school choice programs. 1990, back when Milwaukee had the nation's first voucher program, up till today, when we have 50 private school choice programs. And that number is beginning the 2015-2016 school year. We actually are at 440,000 students for this school year, and we're hopeful to get to 500,000 for the start of the 2017-2018 school year. Another way to look at it is another graphic to give you that illustration. Just shows you, just especially in the last 7-8 years, just how dramatically those numbers are spiking. And another representation of it in the terms of the number of public funds going to students. And I won't repeat all the numbers. You can look at those well enough, but $1.9 billion, a lot of money, state money, funding kids to choose private schools for their education. And this breaks it down between the types of school choice programs. The 2 parental individual income tax credit programs that we use are very small, so they don't show up on here, but they're just left them off the sheet. But it shows voucher programs, scholarship tax credits, and education savings accounts. You'll see that education savings accounts number can start to grow, particularly if with Arizona and the potential of Nevada, both being universal programs, but for now they've been fairly small programs with potential, but not a lot of participation. On the scholarship tax credit side, the primary reason why that number is larger is because a couple of very large states have very robust scholarship tax credit programs, those being Pennsylvania and Florida, which you'll see here in a second. I think it's a slide coming up that shows the states. This shows you the average scholarship value per program, per type of program. And this is something where we put this slide in because we think it's really important for people to understand that to make a choice, a family needs a significant amount of money so that, like I said, low and middle income families legitimately can make a choice, and you're not simply subsidizing families who already use school choice. A lot of scholarship tax credit programs give out very small scholarships. Voucher programs tend to be about the amount of what a public school student would get from the state, so that number is a little higher. Much closer, but not as high as we want, but closer to the cost of education. And then education savings account, that number is very, very large because it's been limited largely to special needs children at this point. And when money follows a child with special needs kids, states are often, as you're all well aware, states are investing a lot of money in the education of special needs children. In fact, I was talking with someone on our Arizona team earlier today, and there's an autism school in Arizona that's highly acclaimed, and one that our ESA programs support, or parents send their children to that school through the ESA program. And those students, I think, are getting often as much as $15,000 per student to use for their education. So that number, as ESA programs grow and have more general eligibility, that number will come down later. But I would say that's probably our top policy priority as an organization, is making sure sufficient money is following the child. And we really don't view $5,600 as enough. I mean, we're trying to, on the voucher side, we believe that should be significantly higher, and in all of our states we make a point of prioritizing that. Here's the chart I alluded to before, just to show you where the numbers are coming from. So Florida, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. I mentioned I said two, but three big states with scholarship tax credit programs. And sure enough, that's where most of the students are coming from in the country because of those highly successful programs. Indiana and Ohio, that's where it's largely voucher. Indiana, Ohio, and Wisconsin, it's largely voucher students that make up those numbers. And again, another way to look at it, this is how much public money is following children to the school of their choice. And Wisconsin, you see, jumps up ahead to second, and Pennsylvania drops quite a ways back. Again, that's because Wisconsin has a much more adequate amount of money following a child versus the Pennsylvania tax credit program, giving students smaller amounts per student, versus the Florida tax credit program. They both have large numbers of children and a lot of money per child following them to their school. So that's an enormous amount of money and a lot of support for parents in that state. And then, next we're going to talk about the progress. So this gets to the meat of the presentation when we want to go over some of the states that are passing school choice legislation this year, still considering it. This is a picture of a march in Florida. I believe it was last January, where the Florida Teachers Union filed a lawsuit against Florida's tax credit scholarship program, the highly successful, highly regarded program. It led to a major march in Tallahassee with people crossing ideological, racial, religious spectrums. It was a pretty inspiring day for all of us, and actually one of the heads, the African-American gentleman who's like in the second row there, is a U.S. congressman from the Tallahassee area, Democrat. So I'm pretty sure that's Al Lawson. So it was a great day, and we were successful. The Supreme Court ruled that the teachers union did not have standing, and the teachers union dropped their case, and several hundred thousand children whose scholarships are protected thanks to that. So great day. And also the man on the far left is Martin Luther King III. All right, so the thing getting a lot of the news right now is the federal school choice efforts led by our former organization chairman, but now the U.S. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. There's several things going on in Washington, D.C. The two things that are probably the most getting the most news is just the continued expansion of the D.C. Voucher Program. It has don't listen to the press, don't listen to the opponents. It has great academic results. We're very proud of those, but after 8 years of the Obama administration, they tried to essentially strangle the program to death. Thankfully, it survived, and we're hoping to see funding and enrollment in that program grow now that we have support in Congress and in the presidency for that program. The major discussion is about a federal scholarship tax credit program that would work similar to state-based scholarship tax credit programs, but be credit on your federal taxes. We were anticipating some more details at our conference this week. We did not get as much as maybe we were hoping for, but continuing to lobby Congress very hard on that issue. Other potential efforts, we've got opportunities on ESAs for Indian students on reservations. That's something that Senator McCain has made a top priority, in part due to the large Native American populations in his state and his support for school choice. Vouchers for active duty military families, voucherized IDEA funds to make sure they follow a child, same with Title I funds, and then of course, include private school choice as a part of the ESSA accountability plans. So for the first time in a long time, there's a real serious discussion about what role the federal government can have in making sure parents have more choices. Now the state work, which Scott and myself and Lindsay do spend most of our time on, has been as active as ever this year. This is just a quick map of states where I felt like things were more active than normal. I'll go through a few of them in more detail. Not all of them, but I'll go through a few. So as you can see, though, I would say those are states with real serious school choice discussions this year. And that's not including a few places that already have very robust programs, like Florida. Virginia has a program. South Carolina has programs. So this isn't just states with programs. These are states where there were really serious discussions about new or expanded programs. Pretty exciting to see some states pop up on this map that haven't been there before. So just a quick update on what has taken place so far. A lot of you probably heard this already, but the Arizona Education Savings Account program was expanded. It now will have a 4-year phase-in, but if you are an existing public school student in Arizona, or you are entering school for the first time in that state, you are eligible for an education savings account. So we're looking at, I believe it's between the $5,000 or $6,000 range for what that ESA is. Really excited about that, and planning to ramp up our promotion of that program so that parents know what's available for them. And we have an opportunity to work on encouraging creation of new school supplies so we can create new seats, new choice seats for students to fill with this program. Oklahoma has several school choice programs, and one of them includes a voucher program for special needs children called the Lindsay Nicole Henry Scholarship, and that was expanded this year to include children in foster care and who were adopted out of state custody. There's a lot more kids here than I think people realize, and an opportunity to grow that program. In Indiana, who's been kind of heralded as one of the, along with Florida, among the leaders of school choice because of their really robust voucher program. Some may not know, but they do have a scholarship tax credit program as well. And the voucher program does not allow kindergarten students, sort of a political compromise that was made at the time that the law was passed, but the scholarship tax credit program does. And so this is a way for a lot of kids entering school for the first time to get access to school choice and they increased the cap on that program. Another provision that for those who are working on school choice programs in their states that you need to think about, and Indiana has now taken steps toward fixing, is that once a program gets more established and you fill some of those existing empty seats in your schools, a lot of programs make it very hard to start new schools in areas that have need and an interest, including the Indiana's program. And so we were able to pass a provision for new schools to go through an authorization process to be allowed to receive vouchers in their first year of existence. Without that, it would take several years, and the school would have to maintain the first several classes of kids, if you're serving low-income kids in particular, through private support, which is very challenging for a new school, for a large school. So that was really important in Indiana, so we can create new quality school choice seats. And then finally, Maryland's new voucher program, while it was enacted, it is an annual appropriation, and it had to get that voucher funding renewed, and it did, despite having a strongly Democratic legislature. Now, what's in progress? We actually still have a lot going on this time of year. It's unusual. Well, not unusual, but it is a little later. Some states are going later, and that just happens. The list of states that we have this year are places where sessions are longer or maybe year-round. Wisconsin, we're hoping to expand that program's voucher program, that state's voucher program. It is already a statewide program, but we're looking to make sure more families, more middle-income families can be eligible, and there are some pretty severe caps on how quickly it can grow. So there are a lot of families who want to be using that program but don't have access to it. So we are attempting to grow that more quickly this session. The Ohio voucher program, we're looking to make some changes there. We have several voucher programs in that state. One has great eligibility rules. One has a very large cap, and we're hoping to bring those two together so we have a much better voucher program, and one that's maybe less bureaucratic and less confusion for lawmakers. Instead of having multiple programs, try to focus on one really good program. Kentucky's a state that's looking to pass a new scholarship tax credit bill. Hopefully this summer there could be a special session where that law could come up. North Carolina, which enacted a voucher program, broad eligibility voucher program a couple years ago, is actually looking to add an ESA for special needs students. They already have a voucher, but they're looking to create an ESA to give special needs students more flexibility for how they use their state education money. Nevada ESA got a lot of attention a couple years ago for creating the nation's first universal ESA program, and is an organization that really, as AFC, we've been in the trenches on every ESA that's passed all around the country. We're particularly proud of being a part of this effort as well. It did go through a constitutional challenge, in which the court said the program is constitutional, but they need to look at the way they chose to fund it. So that's what we're doing right now, and there's a very supportive governor who's working with a current legislature that's not supportive. So we're hoping that the ESA funding will be part of the deal cut between the governor and the legislature. That should come to a head sometime in June. It's not very far away. In Louisiana, I highlight this mostly. It's very prominent for their charter and private choice programs following Hurricane Katrina. I highlight it because the governor that was recently elected is a fierce opponent of school choice, of all forms of public and private school choice. So we're largely playing defense, but I highlight it because we're being very successful. The governor is an opponent, but he's run into a brick wall with the legislature and with the public on this issue. It's encouraging to see his efforts to roll back these programs continually fall flat. I live in Nebraska. For what it's worth, I base out of my home state here. For the first time, a scholarship tax credit law is going to the floor. Don't know about its opportunity to pass this year, but it's a great sign, and it's got a future ahead of it. I made this PowerPoint before Texas. We heard some news in Texas. It's not looking good at this point. The Senate and the Senate leader are strong supporters of school choice. The House leader is not, and so they've been going head-to-head on a special needs ESA, and it looks as though it won't be successful this session. And then finally, Pennsylvania's tax credit, the legislature wants to grow it. The governor is not necessarily a supporter of that, but the legislature has a lot of clout and has increased it very recently as well. So we're hopeful that that will be enacted so we can get more kids on the program in Pennsylvania. And then lastly, close calls around the country. Alabama, Alabama got it out of one chamber, out of the Senate, an opportunity to add more types of different kinds of taxes are eligible for the tax credit program to raise money for their scholarship tax credit. That failed largely due to internal state politics, but nonetheless, we were not successful. Minnesota got a scholarship tax credit bill out of two chambers of the legislature, but it was vetoed by the governor, and they were not able to make it part of the final legislative deal, but certainly very heartening to see the strong support in the legislature and hopeful for the future there. Missouri is another state we're hopeful. While an ESA bill only got out of the Senate and not out of the House, we just ran out of time, very tight session. We have a strong supporter in the governor's office, so that's another state to keep an eye on there. Arkansas, similar to Missouri, got out of one chamber, got out of the Senate, and failed in the House. It was an ESA program, I'm sorry. I had a brain freeze there for a second. And then Georgia, we had the opposite. We got out of the House with a really strong increase to their scholarship tax credit program, but their lieutenant governor, who controls the Senate, is a school choice opponent and succeeded in flexing his muscles and keeping the state Senate from enacting that program. Where we had a supportive governor, it would have been signed into law if not for that. Tennessee's had a voucher program for a long time, or a voucher effort for a long time. It does have a special needs ESA, but the voucher program is really where the large numbers of kids would come from. Last year, that was passed out of the Senate and came just a couple votes short in the House. It just not enough change this year to change the math on that, but there's going to be massive changes in the legislature and the governor's office after the 2018 elections. So that's a state that's been very close with, despite having no leadership from the House in the Speaker's chair. In fact, probably the opposite of that. We still were able to get very close there in Tennessee. And then New Hampshire, they had a very robust ESA program, which got out of the Senate, did not have the opportunity to pass out of the House, but that's another state that's got an opportunity to enact something in the future. So I hope that wasn't overwhelming, but I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have. I think that's the end of my presentation. So Andrea, I'm happy to take questions and go into more detail about anything that folks might be interested in.
Yeah, if you could explain a little bit more about what exactly AFC does and how they can help provide information and resources for people who want to find out more, that'd be great.
Yeah, and actually I did have a slide on that. Now that you say, oh, there we go. Okay, great. I did forget the slide. So my apologies for not doing that at the beginning. The American Federation for Children is, we call ourselves the nation's voice for school choice. We work to enact school choice programs all over the country, working with local leaders like the folks on this call by bringing resources and expertise and experience combined with your local knowledge and try to get some great things done. We've had a great track record over the past period of time since our organization was founded. we do we say we have three different arms. We have an arm that educates parents. We try to sign people up for programs, and we try to organize grassroots support. We have a lobbying arm that does the fight, takes the fight to the state capitals in the legislature. And then one thing that's unique about us, we have a very strong electoral arm, and we've been electing friends and defeating opponents for a long time. This last cycle, I think off the top of my head, I think we had about a 70% win record in the primary and about 82 in the general election. And generally speaking, we don't play in easy races. We go in difficult races where friends need our help. So that's, I think, indicative of our success, and it's also nonpartisan. So we've had election cycles where we spent as much as 40% in support of Democratic candidates, because for us, it's not about party control. It's about people who support parents, and so we'll stand with Democrats, Republicans. It doesn't matter. So we're doing that all over the country. We by no means think we can do it alone. We know the importance of local leadership in this, and so what I try to tell folks is we try to take what we do and empower folks like you all and work alongside you in your local circumstances, which could mean different types of laws, different types of details in the laws. We understand there's not a one-size-fits-all policy for laws, even more than there is for kids. Although we do have model legislation to help guide people, we know there's always circumstances from state to state. In terms of ways that we can work together, I would, let's see, I'm trying to look at the question. Ways we work together. Your organizations are, I think, at the forefront of grassroots work. One of the main problems with school choice programs is that in any kind of passing any kind of law, if there's not a built-in constituency for it, it can be very hard to lobby. It can be very hard to have that energy at the Capitol. So a lot of times we rely on networks like yours to bring school leaders and parents who are currently exercising choice to explain how a school choice program could work to legislators who may not have one in action yet in their state. So you've got a great army of people there that we can bring to bear at the Capitol alongside with you. We also have the policy design expertise, and we can give you guidance on that. Just let you know what has worked and not worked in different places and what the consequences might be. Also, we work alongside many of your colleagues in lobbying. I have a lot of close allies at the Catholic conferences. And when the laws are passed, we'd love your help with school supply, with things that Lindsay's working on. Both educating parents about the schools that you have that are available to them, and also working with you and your school leaders to grow their schools to take even more kids now that publicly funded school choice is available.
Great. And can you give some examples of how school choice can contribute to student academic performance?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, actually, Scott, this would be a great example. Would you like to, people, I don't know, Scott, you can speak up now, but, people point to the Wisconsin program a lot because it's the nation's oldest voucher program. But they recently did a sort of compilation of their gold standard studies, on the program. And Scott, you were working on a little summary of it recently. Can you give folks a little view into the academic success of that program?
Sure. We're now 27 years into the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program. It is the most studied program in the nation. There was a study ordered in the early years by the state, and then another study that was done that foundations from both the left and the right contributed millions of dollars, and they followed kids that were similar sets of kids from similar neighborhoods and similar backgrounds those who all of them applied for a voucher, but only half of them got it. The other half went back to their public schools. And after all that research was done, they found that there was really not much of a difference in the test scores of those students. Statistically, There was no difference except in the final year, and part of that is probably explained by the fact that any child who changes schools tends to fall behind at first, get caught up with the new culture and the change in expectations and teachers and the like, and it takes them a while to move forward. But they did see higher reading and math scores in year 4. But basically, overall, there's not much of a difference in test scores. Some people say, well, then obviously the Milwaukee program is a failure. That's what we hear at the national level. That's what our opponents say. What they don't tell you is that every other measure of academic success shows that the kids who used a voucher to go to a private school are doing much better than their colleagues in the public school. So, well, test scores may be the same. The kids in the voucher program in private schools are much more likely to graduate from high school, much more likely to be admitted to college, much more likely to be admitted to a high status college, more likely to persist in college, more like they will study for more months in college, and shortly they're doing the final year's worth of study to tell us what the graduation rate numbers are from college, but they expect those numbers to be higher. In addition, parental satisfaction is higher, the student satisfaction is higher, parental involvement in school is higher, and the students' involvement in their civic life of their community is higher, and the kids, at least the young males, are less likely to be involved in a crime. So they ignore those other 13 successes and just focus on the fact that there's not much of a difference in test scores. But that's often the case with these studies. No matter what education reform is proposed, they generally don't tend to affect test scores much. What they do affect is expectations and the persistence of the student in education and how far they get through school.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Other examples in Florida, where the program is largely limited to low-income children, the studies have shown that they had generally the lowest performing students in the lowest performing schools, so not creaming, were using the program, and those students, their test scores were improved to what your average everyday Florida student would be. So, you know, your average middle-class children, they were taking kids who were the furthest behind and moving them well up the academic charts. And actually, I forget the number exactly. It's a number I need to memorize, but there have been a number of these gold standard studies they talk about, and only one program has shown any negative results. All have shown either positive or neutral results, and far more on the positive side. The same thing goes for the impact on neighboring public schools and public school students. Very positive across the board. So that's something that, Andrea, maybe I can get you. We have a one-pager on that. I can get it to you. So if folks are interested in those talking points, they can get them through you. There's really no argument as far as I'm concerned. Opponents like to cherry pick, but you know, if they were to look at the broad picture of the academic studies like Scott's talking about, like we have in Florida, like we have in other places, it's really a strong case.
Great, and that kind of dovetails into our final question here. How do you address people that have the sort of sentiment that school choice programs weaken the public schools or discourage diversity? Any comments on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I actually didn't mention the diversity point, but the studies have looked at diversity as well, and school choice programs are generally shown to increase children's access to diverse classrooms and not the opposite. So it's just, it's one of those things in conventional wisdom. I don't know why why people won't kind of look at the truth on that, but overwhelmingly school choice programs have the opposite effect on improving the type of diverse environments that students get educated in. In terms of harming the public schools, again, a lot of these school choice programs are taking low-performing students out of those schools and putting them in new environments, allowing the public schools to focus on students more intently than maybe they were able to, because they had to spend more time on these kids. I don't know how to equate it exactly or how to explain it exactly, but again, the test results show, or the studies show, that that school choice programs have had a positive effect on the public schools. And generally, because the funding for these programs is not as high as we want, but it'll never be likely as high as what a public school is spending on a child, the public schools are keeping more money per child. So they might have less overall dollars, but they're having more money. They have more money per child to educate children. So we really don't think that's the case. But ultimately, we also know education should be about individual children, not about buildings. And so fundamentally, while it does seem to benefit public schools, I would just push back on people and say that's really not the point. The point is, how are individual kids being served? Where is the best place for them to be? And that's not always in a public school. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
The studies also show that the more choices that parents have close to their home about where to send their child, the better off the public school is performing. And the reason for that is obviously competition. So if you have a private school choice program that provides families with a greater set of options, the public schools need to up their game in order to compete with those other options. And the studies have shown that that's exactly what happens, that they actually improve the performance at the public school based upon that competition. And so not only do the kids who go to the private schools under choice programs win, but the kids who remain at their old public school are also better off thanks to the competition.
Well, that's a great point, and that concludes the questions we have from our audience. Do you all have any final comments before we wrap up the webinar?
No, other than I would just say, if you want to learn more about us, you can go to our website, which is Federation for Children, for is spelled out FOR, federationforchildren.org, and you can get email addresses and phone numbers to reach us, or obviously you can reach us through Andrea. We work with a lot of your colleagues as well, so we encourage you to ask them for us. We feel like we have a we have good references out and about around the country.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for being here today, sharing your expertise, and thanks to our audience for their participation and their questions. Before we conclude, I want to invite all of you to visit our website at ncea.org to see listings for our upcoming professional development activities, including our Exceptional Learners Conference, which will be in June, located just outside of Chicago. Registration is still open for that event. We have a few weeks left before that, and our Institute for Catholic School Leaders will be July 16th through 19th in Waltham, Massachusetts, near Boston. So please check out those events. This is our final webinar for this season, but we will start again in August. All of our webinars for this academic year will be on our website on demand, so if you missed one or want to see what the lineup is, you'll be able to check those out on the website in a day or two. Thank you all for your participation this evening, and I hope you enjoy a blessed evening.